Because Wild Turkey 101 has changed throughout the years, I'm going to do this episode a little differently than previous episodes. I have here a mini of Wild Turkey 101 that was bottled in 1983. And I have a sample pulled from one of my old bottles of Wild Turkey 101, bottled in 1996. And I have another sample of Wild Turkey 101 from another bottle I had that was bottled in 2010. As a result, I'm going to be tasting 3 different decades of Wild Turkey 101 from bottles of bourbon that I have owned. Austin Nichols Company started out in the wholesale business in the 1850s, specializing in tea, coffee, and booze. Now, they were also a non-distiller producer in that they produced bourbon that they didn't distill. Instead, they would buy parcels of bourbon from other distillers. And one of these suppliers was the Rippey family. Post-Prohibition, Austin Nichols Company decided to focus entirely on wine and spirits. Meanwhile, in 1935, the Rippey family opened up a new distillery in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. As the story goes, in 1940, an Austin Nichols executive named Thomas McCarthy went on a hunting trip with his buddies where they went to hunt wild turkeys. And he brought with him some of the bourbon that Austin Nichols bottles. Now, his buddies loved the stuff and referred to it as that Wild Turkey bourbon. Within 2 years, the Wild Turkey bourbon brand was born. Meanwhile, that Rippey distillery in Lawrenceburg was sold to the Gould family of Ohio in the late 1940s. In 1972, Austin Nichols decided to take the leap and bought that distillery. So now, Austin Nichols could distill Wild Turkey bourbon. Now, that ownership only lasted for 8 years because Pernod Ricard bought Austin Nichols, the distillery, and the Wild Turkey brand in 1980. 29 years later, Campari then bought all that stuff from Pernod Ricard. Up until 1992, Wild Turkey 101 proof bourbon had an 8-year-old age statement. After that, the number 8 was kept on the label, but it became Old Number 8 brand. That lasted only 6 years, and in 1998, the 8 was removed from the front label altogether. With that in mind, let's get a date on this mini. First off, it has an 8-year-old age statement, which puts it at 1992 or earlier. Next, its alcohol is measured in proof, not ABV, which sets this 1985 or earlier. This 50 milliliter measurement at the top of the bottle sets this at 1980 or later. Though the bottle has a fully intact tack strip, that is not going to determine the age of this bottle. What's on the bottom of the bottle will. And what we're looking at right now is the 83. That designates the year the glass bottle was created. With the whiskey being from between 1980 and 1985, this 1983 designation is a good guess for when this bourbon was bottled. 8-year-old Wild Turkey bourbon, 101 proof, bottled in 1983. Wild Turkey Old Number 8 bourbon, bottled in 1996. Wild Turkey 101 bourbon, bottled in 2010. 1983. Vanilla bean, orange peel, hot, sweaty warehouse. Lime popsicles or lime lollipops. Lots of cherry juice. Toffee pudding, butterscotch, vanilla ice cream. 1996. There isn't much in the way of fruit. Maybe a little bit of the orange peel, maybe just a hint of the cherries. There's a little bit of turpentine. In fact, it's becoming all cherry lollipops on the nose. A lot of oak, straight up lumber. 2010. Some generic caramel, a little bit of a floral note, maybe a hint of dried apricots. Like the 96, the cherry candy note does open with time. I'd say there's a little bit of that orange peel note sneaking in. L'chaim. Heat, and sweet cherry lollipops. A tiny bit of woody bitterness, just a smidge. It's still very intense, even after 35 years in a mini bottle. There's a little bit of acidic citrus, and in the finish, it's actually quite fruity. You have the acidic citrus, you have the fresh cherries, and you have a bit of sugary sweetness throughout. The finish does get a little bit of fennel seed and maybe a little bit of cilantro. And at no point does the oak totally take over. It's there, but it does not dominate. Zdrowie. It tastes like bourbon. There's a real lemony sourness to it that offsets a lot of the oak. There's just a peep of all that cherry stuff. It has a long finish to it, and there is plenty of heat. Loads and loads of oak. Sawdust, chlorophyll sort of stuff. There's a little bit of saltiness, a little bit on the sour side, a little bit on the bitter side. Skål. This is nuttier and more peppery than the other two. A little bit of cologne, a little bit of mint leaf, a little bit of cherry. Again, and a very long finish. It's time to summarize because my palate is starting to get numb here. The 1983 has by far the best sniffer of the three of these. It has the best palate as well, but not by a major leap over the others. The 96 is a very straightforward bourbon. It's not complex. It probably would work very well in old fashions or Manhattans. Regarding the 2010, when I had this bottle open, I did not like it at all. It's reading better now. It's less violent. When it's less bitter, it's less oaky. But due to the enormity of the finish, due to the occasional sparkle of something a little different, I would say it is like a half step better than the 96. Both of these would do better in cocktails or on the rocks than neat. The 1983 works best, I believe, when neat. I'd also like to say this is very consistent work by Jimmy and Eddie Russell.
Papa.
Sounds like my time is up. Oh look, a Manhattan. I guess my time is not up. So here's the thing about